Hello, Oracles and money lovers. Welcome back to episode 14 of the Oracle Investment Club Tesla Weekly. We'll be branching out into some more macro environment stuff today as well, as you guys seem to like that. So we'll branch out and do some more of that stuff. But Vin, how was your week this past week?
Pretty good. We got a little bit of green here. I'm not convinced if we're entirely out of the woods yet, but yeah, I mean, as far as the macro stuff, we know from the Fed minutes last week, Fed has said that they will increase interest rates to levels high enough to, deliberately slow economic growth if they have to in this race to get rid of inflation. We got some interesting news. Apple and Microsoft are a couple of the companies that are increasing workers' pay, and it kind of makes you think, how bad can things actually be? A lot of companies seem to be doing just fine. They did cite like we're in a very tight labor market, which is good. And it actually it's cheaper and more efficient for the companies to pay workers more than to find new employees.
Yeah, even at my job, we have been just slamming. We have been doing amazing. Profits are through the roof. And we're having the same thing, which is, we have employees, we don't want to lose them because we can't find anybody. We literally cannot get people to apply for our jobs. So when we have anybody who is out there, because other companies are trying to recruit from us. And so we're like, well, we'll pay more. So we gave one of our guys a significant pay raise to keep him. Now we did kind of shift his position, so it's a little bit of a step up. So, we can at least justify it, but still that's what we're doing. And so I'm, have no doubt that the companies like the Apples and the Microsofts of the world, know this, and their employees are going to talk to each other and say, hey, well, if they're making this much money, I want to make this much money also. And so they're going to start paying more. And so they're just going to raise the pay to match that. I mean, you figure if inflation's going up as much as it is, and their profits are going up as much as they are, then they can easily afford to pay them to keep them.
Right. And it's interesting. This all kind of comes on the back of, a couple of weeks ago, we had Target and Walmart kind of sent a shock through the market. People are saying, retail is slowing down here. But then we got some other reports from other retailers like Dick's Sporting Goods was one of the ones I was reading about that kind of had a more optimistic outlook. They weren't great reports, but they didn't think that, we were headed for trouble. They basically said everything's fine and sales are kind of stabilizing. They don't believe we're headed for a recession. And even it's interesting, you look at Target, while certain categories sales are down, but it's things like luggage and travel are up 50%. So it's almost like the consumer doesn't seem to be slowing down. They're just spending their money elsewhere. When people want to get out, the pandemic plays may suffer, and the items that were super hot, when everyone's stuck at home. It'd be interesting to see how that impacts, Home Depot and companies like that. But seems like consumer still has plenty of money to spend, which will definitely help, avoid a recession, I think, as long as that lasts.
Yeah, and looking at, the stock market obviously cycles. Right now we're cycling into oil. Where can you make money? People are putting it into oil. I have no doubt it's the same thing that goes for consumers. They're cycling different things. I know for me, I haven't traveled in 2 years, and I'm just extremely excited about traveling. Did New Hampshire last weekend. I'm already planning another New Hampshire trip in 4th of July, probably going up to Maine for Labor Day weekend. And I'm planning another trip for November for my birthday. So people are definitely looking to get back out there, and I know I'm one of them. So I can definitely see the cycling of that. And like you said, how is this going to balance when it comes to actual retail and spending? Is it going to balance where we don't go into a recession, or is it just not going to be enough? Or is this kind of like, all right, once the traveling is done, then everybody's going to hunker back down and just watch their spending again? Who knows? But if we've got companies like Apple, who, are out there, obviously huge employers, and they're cranking up pay for a lot of people, that's going to put pressure on other companies to also raise the pay for people. So then the pay is going to go back up again. And so now the money is trickling down to people, and then spending can go back up again. So, we'll know at the end of July if we're actually getting this recession. But as of right now, it's tough to call. It seems like we're heading in that direction, especially with the housing market. But if companies are going to start paying their people more, then maybe not.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see the kind of cycle through, like you said. And the other big issue I think that just continues to linger here that doesn't seem like it's going to get any better until maybe the Ukraine crisis situation improves. But, a lot of nations are expanding and extending their curbs on exports. So, this is something that a lot of the experts are saying is going to just further exacerbate these shortages. And we have this major global food price inflation that really is an issue. I mean, we're obviously feeling it here too, but it really hits like the developing countries even harder. And all in all, I think about 26 countries have implemented export restrictions on food and fertilizers, while all these countries are struggling with high inflation. And it's just amazing to think about because I don't know if anyone watches the All In podcast. The one guy, David Freeberg, he was talking about this 6 months ago or more, that we were going to have a coming global food shortage, a crisis largely due to Ukraine. And it was kind of many months before the major news outlets picked up on it. And now I feel like I am starting to see them talk about it more. And a lot of this has to do with, Russia's got the blockade of Ukrainian ports. And I think Ukraine and Russia export some 30% of the world's wheat. Obviously, not helping with oil either, fertilizers, all that good stuff.
Yeah, and and it's the longer this Russia-Ukraine thing goes on, it's going to be twofold for me, because obviously the food shortage is terrible, and the oil is part of the reason why oil is going so high is bringing the whole market down. So people are taking the money out of stocks and putting it into oil because that's where they can make money. But you also have to take a look at the fact that Europe right now has decided, by the end of the year, I think they said 90% of Europe is going to be off of Russian oil. So they're going to learn how to survive without it. So Russia's not going to have that as an option. And so that's going to enhance and accelerate the transition over to renewable energy. So we're going to have that happening. They're going to find other sources for it, and they're going to end up doing the same thing for food. So they're going to figure it out. We're just in the transition right now where it's going to stink and be really difficult for a lot of people. And unfortunately, the people who suffer the most are the people who are at the bottom of this food chain. But they're going to get through this. We're going to figure it out. And that's, again, looking at the future, what implications does this have for the future? And if we're looking at this transition to, renewable energy and EVs, and they're kind of forcing the hand with this due to the oil and the Russia-Ukraine war, that's the place where I want to put my money, is in the future. Because yes, the next 6 to 12 months could stink, but coming out of it, what's going to thrive? It's not like, a year from now, all of a sudden the EU is going to be like, all right, well, the Russia-Ukraine war is over. We're now going to get Russian oil again. Because if they do go that direction, it's going to be very minimal because they've learned how to live without it. And I think that's going to be a huge transition over the next year. And then the food, and then of course you look at all the food plants that are getting burned down. Like, how ironic is that they all just happen to be catching fire and burning down? And I mean, we can put our tinfoil hats on and get into conspiracy theories about this, but it's just stepping outside of it, being like, what kind of a coincidence in it is it that all of these places are having this problem? And we have got the Russia-Ukraine situation, and then food price and food shortages. Like, and
then China doesn't help either with their lockdowns.
I'm like, is this a real problem that we're facing, or is it a fabricated problem that we're facing? I don't know. You guys can let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on this. My tinfoil hat only takes me so far on here, but I wouldn't put it past them. Knowing our governments and what they have done in the past, I wouldn't put it past them for this. Well, I hate to think that way, but
yeah, nothing's out of the question. I mean, from what we've seen here, though, especially the last couple of years, it's pretty insane. And just going back to the oil in Europe, I mean, that'll be really interesting to see them get off of 90% of it by the end of the year. Well, that'll be fun. And I know the US is planning to increase our exports to Europe because Americans are only paying $5, or if you're in California, $7.20 a gallon. So we're gonna export more. I know that you love when they do that.
Oh, I know, and it's funny because like I look at the fact that I don't know what the numbers are. I thought at one point we were importing more oil than we were, using our own. And I'm like, why? What? Like, you would think that using your own would be cheaper, but we're not. And I don't know how that all works, whatever. But I did learn today that I guess, looking at most of our national debt and who owns our debt, and a lot of it is owned by China and Saudi Arabia. So that's probably why we do a lot of business with them with their oil, because we're trying to play this money game with them. But I mean, like I made a video this morning talking about the gas prices being so high, and it's like, is it because the left is not doing anything intentionally to keep gas prices high to drive the EV adoption up and change over the world and the country to renewable energy faster? I don't know. That's a theory that I had, but I'm like, in the meantime, all of us down at the bottom are sucking wind right now. I'm like we can't survive. Most people are scraping to get by, and now gas prices, like people are literally going to work to earn enough money to fill their gas tank up, and that's it. They can't pay for anything else other than filling their gas tank up. So there's got to be a better way than how we're doing it right now. I mean, I don't know, but if we are going to be exporting oil over to Europe, then we've got to do something. Like, I'm not a fan of it. Obviously, we want to see renewable energy go up. That's how we want to roll in the future. But if we're going to be exporting oil, then how are we going to get this oil? We don't even have enough for ourselves. How are we now going to export it also? That's my question.
Definitely. No, great points. And like you said, this is only going to fast track EV adoption, I think, here in the short to medium term here, because it's a great transition to, we've got new competitor, new Tesla killer is out. The Toyota, quite a mouthful here. It's the BZ24X. I think they were copying the XAE 12 thing. New Tesla killer is out. It's most similar to the Model Y. It's like a compact SUV. I was reading some reviews about it. This is Toyota's, fully battery electric vehicle. They kind of were saying it's nothing special, no crazy new innovations, just more of the same. And it doesn't even have a frunk space. So I'm not sure what's taking up all the room in there. I mean, but you can never have enough storage space in a car. Right. And it's got a starting price of $42,000.
So, and it was crazy because, not even a year ago, Toyota was like, we're not doing EVs. And now they are. Did they have a release date for it?
I don't know about release, but I do know that they said they want to sell 3.5 million electric vehicles by, get this, 2030. Tesla will be doing that.
Wow. So
Tesla will be doing that in a year or two.
So 3.5 million. So that's realistically at that time will probably be 30% of their annual sales, because they're usually pre-pandemic was about 10 million. So they're looking at about 30% of their fleet in 2030 being EVs.
They're really only playing the game to meet the government minimum, it seems like. I know that they get a lot of backlash in Japan too. People are not happy that Toyota is really actually one of the main lobbyists against, electrifying, because they arguably one of the companies that have the most to lose here.
Yeah, and of course, as going into advertising, Elon had mentioned it the other day on Twitter about the fact that the reason why there's so much negative press about Tesla is because they don't pay for advertising. And it's so true, and it's so dirty to see how that actually works, is the fact that these companies who don't actually have the best product are going to get touted as having the best product, or as GM's case being, they're leading the way, because they're the ones paying to lead the way. It's not because they actually do. And unfortunately, there's so many people out there who just read headlines and go by what the news tells them instead of actually digging deeper. And they believe this. They believe that GM is leading the way. They're going to see this news about Toyota and be like, "Ooh, that's awesome. I like my Toyota Corolla. I'm now going to switch over to this, EV that they're going to be coming out with, because it's going to be the equivalent and just as good." And, then they hear bad things about Tesla, car fires and this and that, and don't hear anything good about it because Tesla doesn't advertise.
Yeah, I think that's one of the bigger societal problems is I think people are just going to become illiterate. All they could read is headlines and emojis. At this rate, we're doomed.
I know.
And yeah, just going back to what you said, it's funny. I just saw a Wall Street Journal article, of course, about electric vehicle recalls. It was not anything to do with Tesla, but guess what vehicles on the picture are Tesla, because it's like you said, they're not the ones paying for the advertising, and Wall Street Journal doesn't want to bite the hands that feed them, or bite the hand that feeds them, with GM and Ford, who give them all their money.
Exactly. Yeah. And they're like, it's a battle for survival right now. That's what it comes down to, and in order for people to survive, they've got to make friends. And, you've got to put hey, where are my friends at that have the money, where we get it from? And then it kind of makes you wonder in the end is, well, what happens when that money stops coming in? So when you've got places like, the GMs and the Fords, and I think Ford is doing relatively well. They've got a great Ford F-150 Lightning coming out. They've got 40,000. They're producing 200,000 reservations. Good for them. They're doing wonderful. But when it comes to like GM, super overwhelmed with debt. They're going to make this transition into EVs that don't make them any money. They're going to have to lose their whole entire service business with their dealers, where the dealers make the money. So they're going to lose their dealers. And that's where they sell other vehicles to, is dealers, and then having to switch over to direct sales to compensate for that, but selling vehicles that don't make money. It's going to be an ugly transition. And what happens when they don't have the money to even float their own business and keep that surviving? They don't have money to pay for advertising. Then these other companies are going to stop advertising and speaking well about them because they're like, well, you're not giving us money anymore. And if you're not giving us money and Tesla's not giving us any money, but Tesla is doing better, we're gonna say good things about them now.
Yeah, and it's interesting you brought up, Ford. They have those 200,000 reservations, and yet they've capped their production this year at 40,000. They're only going to make 40,000 F-150 Lightnings, and you just wonder, okay, so then next year, realistically, what number are they going to hit? Maybe in a best case scenario, maybe they can get to 100K, but I mean, and F-150s, I just looked it up. Best selling pickup truck. But last year, 2021, Ford sold 726,000 of them. So figure that's about where that market caps out. And I would even venture further to say that about 50% of those buyers have zero interest in buying an electric version. So, Ford, yes, I agree. I think they're better off than GM right now. And they kind of, at least are trying to survive here and not completely delusional. But at best, I just see them entering this EV market in 5-10 years as nothing more than a niche at best, where maybe they sell 300,000. And we were just talking before we started recording, we might have some Cybertruck news coming out, which that's going to further eat into their sales.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, so I wonder why they decided to cap it at 40,000. Is it supply chain issues? Is it cost? Whatever it is, I don't know why they decided that 40,000 is where they're going to cap it. But you have to remember too, is ICE manufacturers is another challenge they're facing, is they have to now convert their ICE customers over to EV. Tesla doesn't have to do that. Tesla just has to convert any ICE customer over to EV. That's it. They don't have to convert their own customer base over. And in doing so, Tesla obviously has the name around Tesla. It's a quality vehicle. And, you're going to see all these people out there who are like, gas prices are stupid high. Well, I want to get an EV. This is where I want to go because Tesla is EV. That's all they do. And, I don't know. Ford, I think they're trying to tread lightly, most likely. I have a feeling it's because of costs, because, they have mentioned before that, costs are high. They're not going to make any money on these EVs.
They definitely don't have the supply chain security that Tesla does, I'm sure, with the batteries and the resources either.
Yeah, and when you don't have that vertical integration, that makes it a problem, because vertical integration means that, oh, hey, we've got a problem, we can go solve it, we're good, now we're going to keep on moving forward. You have an ICE manufacturer or somebody who's not vertically integrated like that, you have a problem, you have to then reach out to your vendor. Then your vendor has a problem. Okay, what can we do to solve that problem? Then you have to wait for your vendor to figure out the problem and hope that they're vertically integrated enough to get their stuff together. And then if they have to reach out to their vendors, it's so many middlemen along the way, they're going to hold up progress. Whereas with Tesla, it's Tesla. That's it.
Right.
And they have very strict rules with many of their vendors and suppliers, where they go out there and they're like, all right, well, this is what we want. This is how we want it. This is how we need you to run your business in order for us to run our business. And if you do what we need you to do, you're going to do very well. And that's it.
Right. And the whole thing with the vertical integration is really interesting too, because, you might say, got a visitor over here. You might say that the vertical integration, the other companies, oh, they can just become vertically integrated and they'll be fine. They could just do what Tesla does. But the reality is vertical integration only works if you're the best at it, right? Tesla's the best. They've mastered this. They've mastered the secret sauce of getting these factories out, getting these vehicles online. The other companies like Ford can't just flip a switch and solve all that and take all these third-party suppliers that probably supply 80-90% of the parts and put it in their vehicles.
Yeah, and one problem that I've been hearing from some people is they're like, well, Ford and GM and these legacy automakers, VW, they've got these factories already built. They just have to switch them over to EVs. And it's like, no, you can't just do that. It's not that easy. Yes, maybe some of the machines are going to be the same, but think about what Tesla. Tesla literally took over an old Toyota factory in Fremont. They converted it to EVs. Tesla, being the best as they can be, still cannot get the same production out of Fremont that they're going to be able to get out of Shanghai, Austin, and Berlin, and any new factories that they build. So it's not just a matter of, hey, we can convert this over and start making EVs. Sure, you can. It's going to be extremely expensive, and it's not going to be anywhere near as efficient. And so in the long run, you're not going to make as much money coming out of these factories, which is why several of them are building new factories. But those new factories aren't going to be up and running until 2025 or 2026.
Right, that's definitely true. And I guess that brings us to our other point here. We were going to talk about Elon Musk just brought up the last obstacle or the biggest threat to Tesla today. Drum roll, it is not Ford, it's not Apple, it's not GM. It is none other than Saudi Aramco, interestingly enough. Elon Musk tweeted something along the lines of he thinks that Tesla, here's another, he threw us a little bone here. He thinks Tesla has the potential to be the most valuable company ever. Likes to throw us a little bone, when he's not taking the stock price with all the Twitter drama or political party declarations. But and he added that, when Tesla's market cap making sustainable energy products exceeds that of Saudi Aramco, which is producing fossil fuels, and Saudi Aramco is actually currently the most valuable company in the world. I think they're valued at 2.38 trillion or something like that. Once, a company that is making sustainable energy products exceeds a fossil fuel company, that's when the future will be good for the earth.
Yep, absolutely. And I read that tweet as well. And he's right. And I obviously look at, Saudi Aramco and the Saudis, and they've invested heavily into Lucid, so they can see the future. And a lot of the CEOs, the oil CEOs, had mentioned on the Q1 earnings calls that they had that they understand they're saving these profits. They are running oil prices up. They are not trying to drop it down because they need to put money in the bank for their investors in the future. As dirty and corrupt as you want to think that is, that just gives you the signal that even the CEOs of these oil companies know this is temporary. So once the oil cycles back down, we're going to be transitioning over to EVs, and the Saudis are setting themselves up for that for the future because, this might be the last big swing that oil is going to get. It's not going to go away. Oil is used for so many other things in this world as it is. ICE vehicles are still going to be around for at least 10 more years, but it's going to be starting to fade. And so as it's starting to fade, this could be their last hurrah. And so I think we're going to see that transition happen. I don't know. 2025 is that big year for me. So I think 2025 is the year that Tesla takes over Saudi Aramco as the leader of the most expensive company out there.
That would be awesome. I mean, that's from where it sits right now, that might be more like a 4x. I don't even really know the market cap right now. Maybe it's around 700 billion. But it would be a 2x from the peak, I guess. What else was I going to say? Oh, I found an interesting statistic on. So Tesla's operating expenditure, relative to their revenue, is one of the best, and it's been decreasing. So I think in 2021, they spent, let's say, I think 12% of their total revenue went to capital expenditure. Now, Apple and NVIDIA are the kings when it comes to efficiency and having the best margins. They spend about 3% of their annual revenues on capital expenditures. And, Tesla's already at 12% and projected on track right now, that CapEx is projected to shrink to just 6% by 2024. And I believe if they're able to achieve the 50% growth rate that they've been talking about, then it'll actually be more like 3%. So Tesla's kind of already in the top there of the, these best companies that have the best margins. And what does that do? That's enabled Apple, these types of companies to be where they are because they're so efficient. Like no one can come close to that. Ford and GM definitely are not operating on that level. And, a lot of it does come from the high margins with the software. And, Tesla at this point is an EV and an AI, investment, and the AI end of the business. Elon's kind of said potentially will become bigger because, like there's no ceiling to it. You can just make very high amounts of money and, even more importantly, high profit margins with little input once the technology has been created, obviously.
Oh yeah. And, I'm looking at Tesla being so efficient as an automotive maker. We're comparing them to NVIDIA software chips, Apple chips, software phones, that's high margin stuff. This is an automotive maker. And if, they have said that their CapEx is most likely going to stay steady for the next 2 to 3 years, but their revenue is going to skyrocket. You're absolutely right. By 2025, I can easily see a 3%, CapEx expenditure. And then when you go forward, thinking about, Optimus coming out, Warren Redlick had a great video recently about, a $200 trillion market cap, $200 trillion market cap for Tesla just based on Optimus. You start getting into that, and their CapEx is still going to stay probably relatively low. I mean, you might be looking at under a 1% CapEx expenditure to keep the company rolling and growing. That's insane.
If it all works out with the robot, and it's crazy. Like, I just think about it. We already have a lot of automation within factories. Tesla and other companies have already automated so much. There's so much robotics already happening. Well, if you have this car that essentially now, once full self-driving is completely solved, or arguably you could just do this today with menial factory type tasks. Once you automate all that, and it could just start as something as simple as a little 4-wheeled robot that's, moving supplies where they need to be in a warehouse. Start simple. And, we basically already have the technology for that. And then you can just kind of layer onto it. All right. Add like a little forklift type maneuver, and gradually it can just increase from there until the technology is good enough that you basically have this humanoid robot that can do everything that a human can, which is insane to think about. Changes the world forever, and you can't even assign a value to it.
I mean, you think about like Star Wars, they have all different droids, and all the different droids have different jobs and things that they can do. I can see it being very similar, when it comes to Optimus, and they're going to start it, like you said, with very basic jobs, and doing little things around the factory. And even as Elon said, they're going to most likely start with them in the factories, which is going to be great because they're going to be able to test it themselves. They're going to be able to figure out that FSD that they need for Optimus itself. And they can then show how much money they can save in doing so. So let's say for 3 years, they're only using the factories, but they can bring their expenses down significantly when it comes to labor. Then all of a sudden, other manufacturers out there are going to be like, we want some of that. And so then they're going to go ahead and lease out these Optimus robots to these manufacturers so that they can cut costs as well, because that's essentially what's going to come down to in the future is who can produce the most for the least. And if the difference is going to be between somebody who has human labor and somebody who has robot labor, and the difference is going to be a 70% difference in cost, which way you're going to go. That's it. Always comes down to money. I know I appreciate my company because we do value people, very much so. And I know there's a lot of other companies out there that do that. But if you could save yourself 70% in labor costs by getting a robot, you're going to do it.
Follow the money.
Yeah.
I guess to bring it home, I wanted to ask you, so Toyota going to sell a whopping 3.5 million EVs in 2030. In your models, do you have a projection for what year Tesla would sell 3.5 million EVs?
I do, actually. Let me take a quick look and see where I'm at.
So the trailing 12 months, they broke 1 million. 2021 was just shy of 1 million. I would think in 2022, supply chains, if everything, as long as we don't have an impending, real shortage and battery issue, I think the batteries are the biggest problem with the natural resources. They could do 2 million this year, and they're going to get very close to it either way, I would think.
Oh yeah. So for me right now, and I haven't fully updated it, I've got 2.4 million for next year and 3.7 million for 2024. And the 3.7 million, that doesn't even factor in the robotaxi. So I don't know. And now robotaxi, if it's going to come to volume production, it's not going to produce many, maybe 25,000, I would think, maybe 50,000 in 2024. So not a huge piece that's going to make a dent in that. But yeah, I've got 3.5 million easily.
The revenues from it, though, the revenues from the the
Oh, yeah.
taxi near, once it's out there, very little maintenance, basically pure profit you're looking at potentially.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I'm looking at 3.7 million. And I think that's when we're also going to get the compact car coming out in 2024. We're probably going to have at least 2 or 3 new factories, either in build or being finalizing their build by 2024. So I think we're looking at production to be significantly over 5 million by 2025.
And there you have it. It just goes back to Tesla 3 times faster than everyone else. Toyota's going to do 3.5 million in 2030. Tesla very well could get there
6
in
years.
3 years. Yeah. 6 years before him. Yeah.
Unreal.
That's a good place to wrap up.
Yes. Thank you everyone for watching. Check out Vin over on Investment Club on YouTube. I will put a link in the description below for that. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great one and we will see you next week.
Thanks, Tim. See you guys next time.